Thank you. All right. So, welcome to everyone, our members and guests. Advance with us. So, who we are a group for atheists, agnostics, skeptics, secularists, non-religious, folks of all sorts of different labels and types. We recognize we have some people that are new here. Maybe you're not one of those. Maybe you're religious of some sort. That's okay. You're still welcome. We're not going to kick you out. Go ahead. So we are trying to create a community for rational, God-free living for our members. We have 4 pillars: activism, community, education, and service. And our goal, we are a chapter of Freedom from Religion Foundation and affiliated with American Atheists and the American Humanist Association. And then finally, before I turn it over, I do have to issue one disclaimer. The views and opinions of Jesse Dollemore are solely those of Jesse Dollemore and do not reflect the views and opinions of Brittany Page, who is a far superior person and is much more measured and reasonable in her views and analysis.
Very good.
All right. All right. And with that, we'll turn it over to the people you care to see.
Hopefully the cord works for me.
Hopefully, yeah. This is some really outstanding.
And if you don't get the disclaimer, if you are only a YouTube viewer, is this working now? Is this working?
I can hear you.
It is?
I can
Okay.
hear you.
That's a disclaimer that we play on our podcast because I'm a little bit more radical, some would say, and it just lets everybody know that we share different opinions, and she is not. There you go. That works.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Okay. So, I'm Brittany Page. This is Jesse Dollemore. My mic is not on. I need to turn it on. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you all coming out. And we're going to talk about our journeys from white supremacy, conservatism, and Christianity to progressive activism. And those topics, white supremacy, conservatism, Christianity, they touch on our lives in different ways and to different degrees. So I'm going to be talking about my story first, and then we'll get into Jesse's background. I'm going to be showing photos, and I just want to kind of have us all agree that we're in a trust tree right now, and that we're not going to take our phones out and take pictures of the screen that I'm going to show. Can we all agree to that? Okay, because the pictures I'm going to show you I have never posted publicly, and the reason I haven't posted them publicly is because once I put them out there, I'm not going to own them anymore, and so that's nerve-wracking, but I'm going to show them to you because we're in the trust tree, okay? So I was raised in a white supremacist household, and this is me and my sister in our garage in Idaho. So her middle name on her birth certificate is Arian, and I don't have a lot of great quality photos because I moved out of my childhood home in the middle of the night after an incident, and so they're not all great quality, but these are my parents in front of Aryan Nations when it was located in northern Idaho. So as you can see, the sign says non-Aryans and Church of Jesus Christ, Christian, Aryan Nations. Can you go to the next one? So this is me and my brother. Again, sorry about the poor quality and the flash over my face. My brother is obviously giving the Nazi salute. That's Richard Butler. I don't know if anyone knows the history of Aryan Nations, but he was the founder of Aryan Nations. And that's not my dad. That is my dad's friend who I only knew as Boney, but that is my childhood garage. So there are racial slurs on that punching bag, you probably can't see, and racial depictions that are hateful on the punching bag as well. So next slide, please. Jesse's advancing the slides for me, so he gets to get bossed around.
And I'm doing a really good job of it.
Yeah. Good job, Jesse. Okay, so in that environment, you might suspect that, there was a lot of lies about racial minorities. People who were not white were inferior, they were less intelligent. A lot of the stereotypes that you hear still to this day, things that are becoming more common within the Republican Party that we're starting to see with MAGA Republicans, things that are becoming more normalized. There was a common use of racial slurs in my house. There's videos of me as young as 3 using the N-word on video. A lot of house parties where skinheads would fight in the front yard, and that was just kind of the normal upbringing for me. Framed photos of Hitler in the house. I was taught to admire Hitler, taught that the Holocaust didn't happen. that he was a good person. I remember being pulled out of class in 4th grade, actually, when we had a lesson scheduled on Indigenous people, and my parents did not want me to learn the history as my teacher was going to teach it. They wanted to teach me that they were savages who scalped white women for their pretty blonde hair. And so I had to sit in the hallway alone while all my classmates learned, actual history, or probably something that wasn't actual history because it was Idaho, but something maybe nearing close to actual history, not what I was being taught at home. And it's scary to think about that because that's what's happening in states across the country right now, right? With Moms for Liberty, with the banning of the books. There's a lot of kids that are in that same situation now that are probably being pulled out of their classes, similar to how I was. I don't remember politics being super central to my awareness when I was growing up. I don't think my parents really talked about Republicans, Democrats. That wasn't really the language in my household. But I did meet Pat Buchanan, as you can see. And so obviously they were Republicans, right? Because we went to some sort of campaign rally where we met him, and I have a photo with him somewhere. So I only understood politics in proximity to my parents advocating for this being a white country and keeping it white and keeping immigrants out. Again, a lot of the same things that we hear from the current Republican Party. I remember some stances, like my mom was against abortion and stuff like that. So I struggle to make sense of it though, because I'm like, okay, we're poor and we are using food stamps. And I started to learn about the differences between the two political parties in this country. And I'm like, okay, there's one that supports things like food stamps and funding for food stamps. And then there's one that doesn't support funding for those things. So why are we supporting the party that is like trying to take the things that we're using to survive? Christianity is going to play more of a role in Jesse's story. It's less of a role in mine. It was actually more of a lifeline for me. We started going to church when I was around 12, when my mom was trying to support 4 kids on her own. And I ended up admiring a lot of the people at church. I think it was my first opportunity to get a glimpse of normalcy. And I think when I was a kid, I viewed them as being more normal than they were. But thankfully I got to like a progressive church where they had progressive politics and they weren't hateful. So that was definitely lucky, which brings me to my next slide. So a lot of people ask, how did you escape that? That's the big question, right? And I think the best thing to say is people typically ask me that when they're like, okay, how did you come from that, right? And first I want to say it's nothing special or unique about me as a person. It's definitely luck. And if you've heard Aaron Rabinowitz speak before, I'm going to be touching on similar themes that he has talked about, where there's just a lot of things that happen in my life, these different points of luck where people came into my life and they helped me, and it made a huge difference. And I'm talking about things from my history teacher questioning why I was saying what I was about Adolf Hitler or the Holocaust, to food stamps, things like public policy and really being able to be propped up by programs like that. I also started to lose respect for my parents, and that helped me get some distance from them and the ability to say that they were wrong about things, that the way that they had taught me was actually not, the way that the world actually was. So I also went to therapy, obviously. Got to get some therapy after all that. So I could stand here and talk about the people who have helped me for like 30 minutes, but I don't want to do that because that's not what the talk is about. I was lucky that even though my parents moved me to Idaho, I was still in classes with people who were not white. So that helped when I made friendships with people who were not white, when I dated people who were not white. It helped show me that the things that they taught me about people who were not white were not true. And I started to understand that anyway, right? Because they would say, well, people who are not white are more violent. And I'm like, who is it that's getting arrested every weekend? Is that you, Dad? Yes, that's you. I'm also lucky that I was able to access education, and that's starting with my government class in high school, going to college, being able to get my master's degree in clinical psychology, where I learned about confirmation bias and how we seek out information that will confirm our pre-existing worldview. And
what it is to create research projects, and how you don't just want to read the abstract. You want to figure out how a study was designed, what the methods were, right? All of those things were essential in helping me develop a skepticism and ability to evaluate information and question my own beliefs. Next slide, please. So Jesse and I always talk about on the show radicalizing moments, these moments that happened that solidified our existing political worldview. And there's so many. I mean, I was like making this list, and I'm like, there's just too many to name. But I think a lot of the things that were radicalizing moments that helped me get to where I am now politically were obviously just being poor generally, but like living in Idaho and not being able to use the heater, and sometimes I'd get up in the middle of the night and sneak and turn on the heater and then run down with a comforter and put it over the heating vents. Come on, someone had to have done this, right? And then you're like having that hot air shoot in your blanket, and you're like, yes, I hope she doesn't get the bill. And then scrubbing drains on my hands and knees as a teenager for $5.15 an hour. Watching my mom struggle, and realizing mental health is political. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and when I started working as a therapist, I started to understand how so much of what people experience and the problems that they have are these systemic problems. Poverty, lack of childcare, food insecurity, housing insecurity, and those things require systemic solutions, right? Someone can come into my office and they can talk about those issues, and I can try to help them develop these individualized goals for treating those things. But when those systemic problems exist, it makes it that much harder. I'm not saying it's impossible to address those things, but I'm saying, that's why I talk about politics as a therapist. So what my story means, thanks Jesse. You were right, yeah. No bootstrapping. I hate it when people talk about bootstraps. I hate it particularly when people use my story to represent the theory that we can all just climb up and use our bootstraps and get to where we want to be out of our own intrinsic motivation. And I don't think that's true. I think that we are all reliant on other people to get where we need to be. And we need to be the people that create moments of luck for other people and support them on their journey to success. So another main takeaway is to support a strong safety net. Poverty is a policy choice. Without social programs, without Pell Grants, without food stamps, I would have been stuck in a position where I was not able to change my situation, and that's true of so many people still today. And make education free. Please forgive student loans. For the love of God, please forgive student loans. Okay, so with that, Jesse is going to take over and talk more about the Christianity element that was pervasive in his own history. And there will be no slides for Jesse.
That's right, no slides. I do have notes here. So, again, we really appreciate you guys being here. It's amazing. We've never spoken publicly, I guess, unless you consider the basement of our home and my home studio public, I guess. It ends up being public because you see it on YouTube, but we've never done this before. So it was kind of a risk, if you will. I mean, we're not going to risk anything other than talking to Marcus and Vicky. So thank you. We appreciate it. I truly believe that white Christian nationalism is an existential threat to America, to our way of life, to the structural foundation. Anything that we aspire to be in America will be destroyed utterly and completely and inextricably destroyed by white Christian nationalism. I'll continue talking about it using the phrase Christian nationalism because it's just a lot of words to say white Christian nationalism. When you hear the word Christian nationalism and you think in your head of a picture and you're thinking of Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Lauren Boebert or whomever, you should also be supplanting in there Richard Spencer and Jared Taylor and any other modern day neo-Nazi or white supremacist in its place, because that's what they want. They want their particular flavor, their particular interpretation, one of thousands of interpretations of the Bible. I mean, even in the beginning of Christianity, it wasn't, this is the one version, that will be great forever. Even in the early days after Christ's death, there were the Gnostic, there were just different groups. Everybody had a different idea. And these people want to structurally change how our country works, who gets to vote, everything, based on their particular interpretation of that faith. Having said that, I did grow up, maybe not, we didn't have pictures of Hitler in our house. No one spoke positively about Hitler. I never heard, well, what about the good things that Hitler? I never heard any of that. But I was raised by parents who didn't push back when people used the N-word. I had uncles that would say, get the day off on Martin Luther King. He didn't call it Martin Luther King Day. He called it the N-word Day. But I'll work overtime on that day. That kind of talk was really pervasive. I had a stepfather who taught me that black people had a different skeletal structure than white people, that was closer to apes, or some just pernicious, hateful nonsense. And along with that, and what we're seeing now is, when I grew up, things like that weren't talked about in public, polite society. You didn't go to the grocery store and talk about some of that stuff. But now it's been absolutely normalized. Presidential candidates are talking about, non-white presidential candidates are talking about the Great Replacement theory and all of these anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-black, anti-minority, anti-gay policies that they believe are coming about because of immigration, I guess. I was raised in a household that revered people. Well, revere might be a little strong. We had admiration for, at least sympathy for, sympathy is not a word, sympathy is though, for white separatist groups. Certainly white nationalists like Randy Weaver, militia groups. When you grow up in northern Idaho, where I grew up, things like this are super common. Again, not talked about in normal polite society, but now they are. There's been a metamorphosis. I think that's a great word too, because like a butterfly is this thing, and then it becomes something else in a grand fashion, and that is exactly what white Christian nationalism has done. They have made normal a lot of policy and a lot of ideas that were once, they had to be secret because they were so dangerous. In Idaho in the 80s, I believe it was the 80s, a guy named Claude Dallas killed a couple of game wardens in Idaho, executed them, had them lay down and shot them in the back of the heads. There was the Ruby Ridge thing that happened in northern Idaho with Randy Weaver. These people were looked at as martyrs, as heroes, as somebody who did something courageous against the government that wants to tread on us. It's just craziness. The people who've had it so good for so long in this country, white people want to be martyrs, they want to be tread upon. I've got a meme, I wish I would have done a thing, because I could have showed this, but I've got a meme of the Gadsden flag, the Don't Tread on Me flag, and it's this silly looking snake, and instead of don't tread at me, it says, no one's treading on you, sweetie. I wish I put bumper stickers on my car, because I would put that on my car. I need to get it tattooed on me or something, because a lot of there are certain flavors of Christianity that absolutely lean into that martyr narrative. They lean into, we're oppressed. They want me to wear a mask and protect the people around me because there's a global pandemic and 1 million people in America are gonna die. Oh, poor me, this is oppression. It's just, it's an illness, it's a sickness, but it's also giving people who just inherently don't feel important or powerful a sense of power. Given a reason to why they're being oppressed is that they're the new endangered species, straight white men. We've had it so hard for so long. Now we've got a new breed, a new classification, a new generation of these white Christian nationalists. Your Ammon Bundy, if anybody knows, remember the wildlife refuge that was overtaken in Oregon by these nuts? Ammon Bundy, he ran for governor in Idaho, real stalwart Christian fella. He's one of these, the Oath Keepers. You've certainly heard Oath Keepers. Their leader, was convicted of seditious conspiracy against the United States of America for his role in the attempted overthrow of our country, the insurrection against the nation, the Three Percenters, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo movement, if you've heard of that, and then of course the cadre of goofs who literally, physically, in an armed insurrection attempt. I mean, we are every generation, we're witnessing history here. We are witnessing history here. We have a group of individuals in this country who think that they are doing the right thing by attempting to overthrow the government, by attempting to reinsert. I mean, we can set aside the fact that it's Donald Trump. I mean, not even like Ronald Reagan, who was bad enough. Donald Trump, they're going to lay down their freedom on the line. Am I doing that?
Yeah.
I'll quit moving. I mean, they're willing to give up their freedom for this cause, and that's what's dangerous, and that should tell you everything you need to know about where we are with this, what I'm classifying as an existential crisis, because if people are willing to give up their freedom, again, for Donald Trump, you know, I got a voicemail the other day, and he was just like, you know what I'm not willing to do? Go to prison for Joe Biden. I think he's great, I think he's doing a good job, but I'm not willing to go to prison for him. What is happening?
I turned my mic off, so.
Got to pin this podcast?
Yes. Yes, I do. So I'm way off the mark here. I just started talking. So anyway, in our household, absolutely politics was, differently than Brittany's household, politics was front of mind. We lionize certain constitutional amendments, and much like certain white Christian nationalists, they cherry pick from their Bible the things that they believe are important and the things that they should adhere to, and then just disregard those that they don't believe. Obviously, the First Amendment or the Second Amendment was huge in our house, that we have a God-given and natural right to own weapons of war. I was raised to believe that if I want to own a nuclear weapon, why would the government tell me it's illegal? If there's all kinds of things that are illegal that we make laws. Just nonsense arguments that don't make any sense. I couldn't even watch Cops. Let me pick my words more carefully. I didn't like to watch the program Cops, you know, bad boys. I didn't, because, why is he searching? He didn't get that, doesn't have permission. This is a Fourth Amendment violation. Like, certain things like this made it impossible for me to enjoy that trash television show. That'll come back into play here. The 10th Amendment, states' rights, the same argument that was used by the Confederacy to justify the continuation of the absolute scourge and amoral practice of owning human beings as property. Right on, yeah, well, it's the Constitution, what are you going to do about it? There's never any talk about making people's lives better. There was never any talk about propping people up, about public benefits being a trampoline. It was always a hammock. Oh, they're languishing. It's the government giving everything away. While at the same moment, and this is, I'll start wrapping here, but this is when I started realizing that maybe they're wrong about what they're saying, is that at the same time that we are on welfare, that I'm getting my health care from Medicaid, that we are on food stamps, that I get free lunch and reduced lunch at school, at the same moment, my parents are wailing and gnashing their teeth about the evils of government that want to oppress us. Because remember, don't tread on me with your food stamps and your welfare and your keeping us fed and clothed. So the hypocrisy was really kind of in your face. Again, when you're accustomed to supremacy, white supremacy in this case, equality is really a bummer. It feels like you're being oppressed and that you're being tread upon. So coming out of radical conservatism was a process. It wasn't, I woke up one morning and I was like, you know what, that's all wrong. I'm now liberal. It was a long and arduous process, and we'll get to it a little bit when we talk about starting the podcast over 10 years ago now and what that looked like. But ultimately, what drew me out is the same adherence and respect for some of those principles, like watching the show Cops and being outraged at how they were treating citizens, I didn't look at it as, oh, you can mistreat the black citizens, but the white ones you need to leave alone. That was never it. So I went into adulthood. I joined the Marine Corps and got a real fulsome, wide, just an advanced lesson on humanity and living with people of different cultures and different backgrounds and just the differences between us. And it was that hypocrisy that really informed it. So for me, the entree was the entrance into progressive politics and where I am now politically was social justice, which is now a bad word to some people. So we'll say civil rights, because that doesn't ruffle as many feathers, but it's the same. Any kids in here? It's the same goddamn thing. Civil rights and social justice are the same thing. So marriage equality is important. People being able to live their lives just like I do. The 14th Amendment that so often gets forgotten. Equal justice under the law, the Equal Protection Clause. That's also in the Constitution that these white Christian nationalists love to quote so much. Racial equality. The freedom to be who you are, whether anyone else understands it, as long as you're not stepping on my feet or hurting me or harming me or my position in the world, we should not care if someone is trans, whether you agree with it or don't like it or don't understand it. None of that matters. It doesn't matter unless you have your God in the sky who tells you this is wrong, or your particular interpretation of the Bible that would say that is wrong. So the civil rights and social justice were absolutely my radicalizing moment. And also, this will bring me full circle here with the Christianity and the hypocrisy, is watching as a kid the people that I truly admired, the Kenneth Copelands, that guy's still alive and doing stuff, the Jimmy Swaggarts, the Oral Roberts, the Jim Bakkers, the name your nutty evangelical prosperity preaching, God wants you to send me $2 or whatever, or little old lady, send me your social security check, otherwise God's not going to have the money to do. It doesn't make any sense. So, and now we've got a whole new crop of these grifters, these liars, these charlatans, these absolute dregs on our society. Jim Bakker still is kicking. Kenneth Copeland still is, but now you got Hank Kuhneman, you got Robin Bullock, you got Johnny Enlow, you got Lance Wallnau, you got Paula White, you got Julie Green. Yeah, what was that? Yes. Well, to a lesser degree, because he's not pushing white Christian nationalism. That guy just wants to make a bunch of money. You're right, though. It's not great. It's not great. So, obviously, I came to progressivism before that. But witnessing the people that I used to once truly admire and think were mighty, righteous men of God, people who were not to be touched. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about, touch not God's anointed. And that's the way we looked at people like Kenneth Copeland, or even our own pastor at the time. And looking back on those people, and if that's how my parents truly thought about them then, and now to use another biblical reference, the scales have fallen from my eyes, and I see who these people are now, and it's so clear, that's gross. I don't want anything to do with that. So it kind of brings us to what our values are, the journey out of white Christian nationalism, radical Republican politics, which at the time was radical, now it's just mainstream Republican platform stuff. And 10 years ago, Brittany and I
Back in the slides.
started a podcast. And this is even pre-YouTube. We started a podcast 10 years ago called I Doubt It. It did start as a skeptic podcast, and we very quickly learned that the question of God, or the existence of a God, wasn't going to change anybody's life the way we really wanted to change someone's life. We believe, and stop me or interrupt if I'm wrong, that we truly believe that activism and trying to make people's lives better, materially better, is the way to live your life. We want to maximize human flourishing, and through public policy, we think that's the way to get it done. Now, I'm obviously more bombastic and maybe alienating than I should be. I name call, mainly because it's fun for me, and it's, I believe, funny. I don't mind when people call me names. They're probably right when they call me the names. But ultimately, we think that striving to make people's lives better through public policy, through equality, through equity, whether you believe to go that far or not, are the way that we should get things done. And the way we do that is through activism, is through finding a way to a polling place if that's all you can do, donating to political campaigns if that's all you can do. But we're not going to be able to fight the grifters. I mean, they've been given permission to grift as hard as they can grift in the griftiest grift way that they can grift. I mean, their dear leader, Donald Trump, is grifting tennis shoes and Bibles, right, that are included, no extra charge, with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the handwritten lyrics to God Bless the USA, of course. You couldn't put that back. So anyway, we just really advocate, especially in this election year, that you would find a way to give back, find a way to promote the ultimate in human flourishing that you can, because poverty is a public policy choice, and it's only through policy that we're going to be able to make the world a better place.
And we're not totally there yet, but I like where you're going. So some of the themes on the show are obviously moving the conversation forward. We're going to do this together because it's our shows now. And we invite a lot of experts into the conversation because it's two people who have been wrong about, everything. And finding our way to knowledge and the way that the world works. You do that by inviting experts into the conversation. So we interview academics, we have politicians on. We moved to DC specifically to start trying to do more of that. And at the end of all of our interviews, we like to ask people what's the most recent thing you've changed your mind about, in the spirit of getting people to that mindset, to encourage them to be comfortable changing their mind when the evidence changes or when their understanding of the evidence changes. So we really try to live the lessons that we have benefited from learning, I guess, in our lives, and try to carry that forward with our audience. A recent theme is also thinking critically about media framing. So as the election comes up, it's really important to start thinking about how the media frames some of these stories and the information that they give to people. We also have fun segments. It's not all serious all the time, Taking Care of Biz, where we shout out people who do good things, and there's no kids, right? We also have Asshole of Today, where we recognize people who are not doing good things, okay? So Jesse, his YouTube channel, we started the podcast 10 years ago. We're about to do like our 911th episode, I think. And Jesse has over 600,000 subscribers. He does daily videos. I don't know if you want to talk about your channel. I know you talk about it as being a great gateway to progressive politics. You feel like you kind of help people get there with some of those views.
Yeah. Well, the problem in how, and we're going to open this up for questions. So if you got questions, we're here for it. A lot of times people, like the whole social justice thing, people it's like CRT, it's like woke. So the right uses buzzwords to try to communicate broad, large ideas, and they make them negative. And social justice is one of those. If someone calls me a social justice warrior, yes, please, more of that, absolutely. Maybe I should get that on the other arm tattooed. Because it's civil rights. What world do we live in when civil rights is like, oh, you're a civil rights warrior? Great, okay, great. Yeah, I wear it with a badge bomber. So, yeah, go ahead.
All right, and I also started a podcast. So Jesse got colon cancer 2 years ago, and
I wanted to talk about that.
He's all good now.
I really did. It was in my notes.
And during that time, I had to take over for him with his videos, so I started doing YouTube videos. So I also have a YouTube channel where I talk about a lot of the things that you just heard me talk about. Poverty is a policy choice. I do also talk about white supremacy related to like cops who get outed as being white supremacists. I know you're like, they're being outed as white supremacists. Don't we like know that that's really common? Yeah, but I like cover it when it actually happens, when we have evidence of it. Mental health is political, you know, all these things. So there are some downsides to thinking in public. We get a lot of death threats.
I almost started my talk saying thank you for not coming to assassinate me. And I thought maybe I don't want to give anybody any ideas.
We were a little worried about that. Seems to be going well so far. Don't know how things will go.
We're still standing.
Yeah. So with that comes privacy concerns, a lot of unsolicited advice. When Jesse got cancer, people were writing him like to eat honey or like flax seeds, or you know. He got surgery, that's what, you know, solved it.
Shockingly, no one told me just to smoke a bunch of weed. That's a lie. Everyone told me to smoke. And it would cure my colon cancer. You know what cured my colon cancer? Surgery and science.
Oh.
Yeah.
There are a lot of positives to thinking in public too. We hear from people all the time that they listened to a show, that they watched a video, and then it changed their perspective about something. So I think a lot of times we hear from people and they're like, you know, I have conservative family members or I have conservative friends and going to Thanksgiving is a nightmare and how do you change people's minds? And we don't have the answer for that, but we just know that it can still happen because we hear from people all the time that it is happening.
I think
And
that's
I know that that's, you know, anecdotal because it's coming from me, but just trust me, okay?
It also, I think, the whole not having answers, a lot of people when they talk to us, they want solutions, like how you did it, tell me how to recreate that in someone else. And there's just, luck plays too vital a role, too intrinsic a role in how we changed and the makeups of, you know, several people who walked in the room were like, oh, you guys are taller than I thought. Like I'm tall, white, straight, I was born with whatever intelligence I'm able to have. All those things are not in my control, totally luck. So there is no recipe that we can point to help someone extricate themselves from a bad situation. And thank you for not, or maybe you are pissed off in your mind right now, like, oh, I wanted an answer, but they're just not.
Yeah, and that's the other positive too, is being able to amplify other people's stories, because that's what helped us change our minds too, right? Is learning different perspectives, learning more from other people. And so having the chance to hear from people, which we invite people to call us, leave voicemails, email us, and we can amplify other people's stories. So getting to what Jesse was talking about, we included a little countdown here. There's, 212 days before the election. And so with everything that we just talked about, we would invite you to think about what more you can be doing to get involved to ensure that we don't end up with President Trump. And with that, we'll go to questions and my Simpsons generator that says I will subscribe to I Doubt It podcast.
Or comments, or call me a name, love it. We are here for it.
And I guess if you're here to assassinate us, now would be the time.
But you better make it quick. Don't let me know it's gonna
So
happen.
before we get into that, just wanted to just level us out a little bit on question and answer time. If you're gonna ask a question, please make it an actual question, not a story or more of a comment than a question. Ask a nice, concise question so people can lots of people have the opportunity.
I can shut people up pretty
All
good.
right, you handle that. Yeah.
Sir,
Yeah, Mark.
I wanted to turn into a Tony Robbins event or something.
Brittany, are you a member of the Secular Therapy Project?
I'm not, but I have heard about it.
Okay.
Should I join it?
Yes.
Is this a pitch?
Are you the founder?
No,
And also a member?
The Secular Therapy Project allows people to look for therapists who are not going to offer a religious perspective on the treatment,
Yeah.
a you are forgiven type of, yeah, go pray kind of thing. So just recommend that you join the list. So I'm assuming that you're in Idaho. That if somebody is in Idaho looking for a therapist who is similarly coming out of or on the border between believer and non-believer, that at least you would provide a non-religious perspective on your therapy approach, your
Yeah.
therapy options, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I work in a psychiatric hospital, so I don't have a private practice, so it's kind of different for me, but I have referred clients who are in need of a secular therapist through the Secular Therapy Project. I definitely support it. If I ever get to the point where I'm in private practice, I will definitely join it. Yeah.
And we live in Washington, D.C. now, to be
Yes.
closer to the...
Not in Idaho.
You're East Coast.
Actually, yeah, we're coastal elites now, so things are much better on this side.
Yes.
But
Good
we
question.
we are from Idaho, lived in Orange County, California for over a decade, and now we live in D.C. And every time we meet anybody, we have to assure them, we know we look like this, and we know the two places that we just lived for a long time. We know that we're not Republicans. We know. That joke usually lands way harder. Thank you for humbling me. Sir.
On show from Raleigh. You guys, I think Jesse, you touched on it. When you were growing up and you see a non-white that's successful, whether it is
A non-white,
let's say,
okay, yeah.
that's successful beyond sports, but you touched on sports, maybe they had a physical advantage. When you guys saw non-whites that were successful, how did you reconcile? How did your family explain it? Was it luck? Was it affirmative action? Was it dehumanizing? They're not actually regular humans. They've got an extra, they have a different bone structure. What was the explanation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't remember. I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, part of the reason, so they moved us from Southern California to Idaho to be in a white area where we wouldn't be exposed to as many people who weren't white. So growing up in Idaho, I didn't really see a lot of people that weren't, white. When I started going to middle school, there were kids in my classes who were not white, so that was kind of my first exposure. But I don't really remember examples that I can point to. I never heard the stuff about like a different skeletal structure or the stuff that you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my parents would have been reluctant to give any kind of even sideways positive commentary, like that they had superhuman strength or something like that. So I didn't really hear any of that.
Yeah, and with me, I think it was more any success that, like if they ever bucked up against a political issue, they would talk about it in terms of affirmative action and that being bad. But that entire argument has really, it has evolved into something a lot more, not more pernicious, but more openly pernicious, where now you've got Charlie Kirk and all these dipshits out there. I'm looking for kids, I don't like that. Somebody did email me and say, hey, I was gonna bring my kids, is it gonna be appropriate? So I didn't want to. But these dipshits who, there's black female pilots, this has to be because of affirmative action. Ignoring the fact, again, bringing hypocrisy into it, ignoring the fact that Clarence Thomas, a brilliant legal mind, certainly an insurrectionist POS, but not a dumb guy, he did get to where he got because of affirmative action. They ignore that part. It's only when it suits their political needs that they talk about it. But yeah, I think that's how it would have been addressed in our household.
That's why we're hand next.
Mike, I guess Rollin.
I was joking about where you're from. But what's your address?
You mentioned, so there's the clergy project, which is, for people who are entrenched in their religion, they have authority, and it's difficult for them to, as they're coming out of faith, they go to the clergy project, that's a way for them to interact with people who've also fallen out of faith. And, sometimes I think about, is there a similar thing for Republicans who have turned progressive, but they're in these entrenched communities, so their social networks kind of force them to speak one way. My question, I'll try to make it concise, is did you see did you see social pressures making it difficult to have these alternative perspectives, and how have you noticed your social networks kind of develop, change, or dissolve as you shifted to the Republican?
Wow, there's multiple answers there. You want to? So,
I'm trying to think.
Certainly, the last question, the social network has absolutely altered. I'm not in contact with my parents. My mom was a Trump delegate in Cleveland in 2016. I come from a very political family, and the fact that I am no longer an evangelical, running up and down the aisles, tongue talking, that flavor. It was a done deal. I might as well be a devil worshiper is of the devil's real. So the social network absolutely changed. As far as pressures, social pressures, the other luck element in my life is that I was born not giving a single shit about what people think. You call me fat on YouTube? Awesome, great. You're right, I'm fatter than I should be, you know? So I don't really have that gene or whatever flipped on or flipped off. So I can't speak to that.
So I think for me, yeah, I was always kind of an annoying kid. Like my mom's friends would come over and I would argue with them about abortion, like being pro-choice, my perspective, and they would be anti-abortion, and we would be like having a debate, and I'm like a kid, like they're arguing with a kid, and they would get mad and like leave the room, like very insufferable. And
Leaving, or you arguing?
Me. So of course I started a podcast as an adult, and so I feel like I was already on this trajectory, and then I was just being kind of shifted. And it's not like by the time I left high school I was in good shape, but I was well on my way there, and then college really kind of accelerated the process for me. But yeah, I mean, my social circles I think have definitely changed. I think part of it is, you know, we've been doing a political podcast for 10 years, so our job is political, and we talk about politics a lot. It's very difficult to separate our lives from politics. And so the people that are in our lives are people that can tolerate hearing us talk about politics, or you know.
Nor do we want to stop that from being the case in our lives. I would feel incomplete if we weren't constantly.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we accidentally went to dinner with a Trump supporter when we moved to DC.
Next door neighbor,
Yeah.
When we moved to DC, I told Brittany, everybody's liberal. Donald Trump got like 6% of the vote, and then our next door neighbor was a political appointee who led the team at Treasury to keep Trump's taxes away from Congress. So we went to dinner.
That's what I mean, accidentally.
Before knowing.
Yeah, and you know, they wanted to continue a friendship, and it just seemed, you know, it's not like we can't be friends, but it would just be like, I want to talk about that all the time, because I feel like I have work to do. Again, annoying kid in me, like, coming out.
I figured it out in the middle of dinner, and across the table, I was like, who'd you vote for, dude? And then that was it.
And he said, oh, you figured it out.
You figured it out. And we left, and it was nice. You know, I didn't lunge across the table and do what I'm hoping none of you do to me.
We learned later that there's a ProPublica link that has his name that says, if you have a tip for us, email us. So we should have kept the friendship going, is what should have happened there. Yeah.
Sabotage!
Thank you.
Any other? Yeah?
Are y'all familiar with Daryl Davis?
No.
Daryl Davis.
Good?
Yeah, he's good.
Oh, he's a good guy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Who is he?
Black musician who said about talking to KKK members.
Oh, yeah, I know that. Is he the guy who has talked many of them out of their robes?
Yeah, like.
I know who he is.
60 directly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to learn more about him. I'm suspicious that he's actually changing hearts and minds, but I would have to know more. That's not a definitive statement. I've always, because I'm a guy who just says what is on my head, I don't, you know, I wonder about that.
What kind of experts do you want? This is a, give to us, what kind of experts do you want to talk with, to interview? That is, if we have our own networks.
Oh, yeah.
Who should we be sending your way?
Urban
the
Yalom.
Professional left,
Before you know.
Professional Left podcast with Drip Glass and Blue Guy.
Me?
Well, I said Urban Yalom.
Well, for us, I think people who are in the political, I mean, we moved to Washington, D.C. for that very reason, to be closer to the action, and we've had Jamal Bowman, we've had some, you know, people, congressmen and authors, and I would love public policy experts on. We recently had Melissa Fowler, who's the chief program officer for the National Abortion Federation on, and it was because of her meeting with us, her appearance on the show, that we got passionate about her organization.
They run the National Abortion Hotline. I don't know if people know about the National Abortion Federation. So if you call the National Abortion Hotline, they help people who need funding for an abortion, or they help fund the travel to
Like
get
if you live in
the
Texas and you
procedure.
need to get out and you don't have money, they'll help you.
Yeah.
So it was through that we got passionate about it, and we didn't raise it, but we used our platform to raise about $15,000 for their organization. So yeah, listen, It was the viewers, it was our listeners, I think we gave $500, so if you want to applaud 500, give me $500 worth of applause. So those are the kind of people that we would really love to be in
So
contact with.
more politics people, media people.
Yeah, sure. If they have reach, if they have a public policy position that's going to move the needle toward a more fundamental measure of human flourishing, yeah, hell yeah, we want to talk to them.
Jose Andres, we want
How about
Jose Andres.
how about street epistemology like Peter Boghossian?
Not a fan of his. I think he's a little too cancel culture, right-wing adjacent for me.
Yeah,
And-
he's a
and-
little too intellectual dark web
And
like, for us. I
It just
think.
wouldn't be a good conversation because he's going to hear that from me, and he's too close to James Lindsay and some of those nuts for me. So
Thank you for that, though. We're going to go to both of you because we've been seeing you guys. Who was first?
Go ahead. You kind of touched upon this briefly, Brittany, in one of your answers, but at what ages did your mindset really start to shift away from your family, and how did you navigate that? Was there a certain point at which you realized that relationships with your family were untenable to maintain?
If I had to pick an age, I would really say like 10th grade in high school is when things really started to shift for me. And my dad was already gone. He was in prison at that time. So he died 2 years ago. So there's no relationship with him, and there hadn't been since I was like 12. And then I haven't talked to my mom for 10 years. I didn't want to go full trauma dump during my speech, but there's like a whole lot of different reasons that I don't speak to my family. It's not just the white supremacy stuff. But breaking away from that was difficult because I had to find my way of not being able to be connected to my parents. But I would say 10th grade was the main thing because that's when I had a history teacher who was like, wait a minute, what's going on with this Holocaust stuff that you're saying, and what's happening with this Hitler stuff that you're saying? We need to kind of interrogate this a little bit. And I think that's also when I started to get curious generally about wanting to know things and wanting to be like an educated person. And so, yeah, I would put it at 10th grade, however old you are at 10th grade. I don't know about your age when you thought you
Marine Corps, probably in the middle of the Marine Corps. And then really it accelerated when we started the podcast because we wanted to, immediately we started a voicemail line, so we started getting pushback, and then I would want to, I'm going to prove them wrong, and then I would look up like, shit, they're right. So that happened too many times, and then I started really negotiating or navigating those waters of being right and wrong, and like, why do I believe what I believe? And a lot of that evangelical stuff was baggage that just carried on with me. But middle of the Marine Corps is when it started, and then probably 12 years ago, it really kind of started finishing. Like I wouldn't recommend going back to listen to episode 1 because it's trash. But it's a different guy you're going to hear who has more of a romanticization of like libertarianism and stuff like that. Which if we all lived in a perfect world and everybody would treat each other with justice, great, that would work. We don't live in that world.
So we'll go here and then there, just as
Okay.
order.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. So what do you guys think about sort of what our future is if there is a life after Trump, assuming, God forbid, that he loses, and
God forbid.
Huh?
God forbid.
Hopefully that he.
Oh, if
loses.
he, yeah, okay.
No, just because I'm a middle-aged white guy, I'm not a Trump supporter. No, I'm way out on the left. No, it's just it seems to me that I lived in Washington D.C. for a number of years during the second Reagan administration and a bit of the first Bush administration, and I knew people that everybody there, this. We network. We know people that govern this stuff, and my son-in-law works for the president now, and he also worked for Trump because he was an appointee. He's in the military. And it just, everything seems so utterly divided right now. And I don't hang around with Trump supporters. I cut them all out of my life. And I'm kind of sad about it. Not sad about that, but sad that I've lost friends over this. And do you think there is anything on the horizon that will sort of break that hold on that 38% of our society?
So I've got good news and I got bad news.
Right.
The good news is yes. The bad news is probably not going to be for like 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Because these ideas, these pernicious, hateful ideas, these divisive ideas, they have to fade away. And it's, I always hear this, and it bothers me a little bit when people say it, even though it's true, is that Trump, he didn't cause all of this, he's just the symptom. Yes, and he also caused a lot. He gave permission to people to use the back of their lizard brain to be the worst version of themselves that they can. And he does it by design every time he opens his fat, sloppy mouth. Every time. When he says bloodbath, yes, he was talking about the auto industry, but he uses that word by design. One thing you will, if you are a YouTube viewer of mine, is I work very hard not to use dehumanizing language, even of Republicans. I don't call them animals. If I ever catch myself, I will immediately correct and say, metaphorically speaking, I mean, because I don't want to play into that. I don't want to use violent rhetoric about the crosshairs being on this or that. We're better than that, you know? So it's going to take some time for these ideas to fade away, and for maybe through attrition, people actually dying, just expiring, for these ideas to die.
Yeah, the one thing the little thought that I had, and I wonder what you think of this, was I think Trump is absolutely the person, like you said, that flipped the switch on this and lit the cake. But honestly, like, as we've moved into the 21st century, the shackles of the 20th century are kind of falling away. New ideas and new thoughts on the left, people who are free thinkers start to see more and more of that stuff, and it becomes more pervasive in our culture. That means that right-wingers, Trump or not, have become more strident in their views.
Reactionary, sure.
Much more reactionary. I'm seeing more and more of that. And it's really quite depressing, and I have kids and grandkids who just like, I hope there's a future for them.
Yeah, this is related to what I said about when you're used to supremacy in a society, when all of a sudden you're feeling equal to someone else, whether that be a woman or LGBTQ or whatever, a person of color, that feels like oppression for you because you've always just luxuriated in white supremacy. It's the same thing with that. The more freedoms people get, the more equality they get, the better they're treated, the more they're flourishing in our human existence. Right-wingers feel like something's being taken away from them. So, look, it's a nuanced thing. There's a lot of moving parts. Ultimately, we just got to do the best we can do in our daily life and advocate for things like that.
I also think a lot of what we talk about on the show is organizing for political power to make those material differences in people's lives. And it's not as though, racism within the MAGA Republican Party is going to be eradicated through good public policy. But I think if people are, not in a vulnerable position, not living in poverty, and they feel supported in their goals to achieve and create the life that they want, that they'll be less vulnerable to movements like that and cults like that.
And then I'll put a button on to answer the final question. Not the final question, but the final answer to this question is, lucky for us, so I guess it's bad news, or good news, bad news, good news, is they're destroying themselves. They're absolutely leaning in. They are without shame. They are without dignity. It is shamelessness run amok. They're leaning into Trump's grift. Lindsey Graham said it. Marco Rubio said it. Everybody said it. If we elect Trump, if we buy into this, he will destroy us and we'll deserve it. They were right then. They're just wrong now because now they saw the writing on the wall, and to have political power in this political party, Republicans, you got to be in the team.
I can ask you later.
No, go.
Okay.
No, you don't want to. That's fine.
No. Okay, so growing up, both of you sound like you kind of grew up in these corrosive environments. However, as someone who's also kind of grown up in a corrosive environment, over a certain period of time, after I woke up, I kind of had this feeling of disgust, or didn't like a lot of what I was. But then, in order to heal, I kind of had to come up with okay, but what do I still like about myself? What about my experience makes me me that I'm proud of, like a positive construct? And I just wondered. I heard you say that you were that argumentative kid, and that really you guys maybe identify and then eventually thrive. And I was going to ask you if you could think of any other qualities or things that really helped you dig in and say, this is who I am, this is who I've always been, I'm just, I've just blossomed, or something like that. Yeah, that was
That's a really cool question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also for me, being a helper is a big thing too. So like being a therapist, working in a psychiatric hospital, like I really helping other people. And I grew up in an environment where I was taught not to trust people, and people were out to get me, and people were going to do me wrong, and that's not how the world is.
You also talk a lot about, and you can speak more to it as I tee you up here. You're welcome. Brittany talks a lot of, especially working in locked psychiatric facilities, that we're not better or different than the patients in this hospital. But for the grace of God, but for luck, we could be homeless. They say that there's a massive swath of America that wouldn't be able to withstand a $400 emergency charge, and there might be people in this room that's the case. And we, in recent years, had to count change to put gas in our car. And if something had gone wrong, only a couple steps removed from homelessness. So, I don't know, maybe I just answered it fully for you, but.
Yeah, well, I think, so being an argumentative dick, first thing, and then being helpful, I think were like my two orientations that really helped me kind of.
Yeah, and also realizing that,
So what about for you?
You didn't give a shit.
Yeah, I mean, some part of that is, but a part of it also is just working through. I don't think any of the racism really stuck with me. Like, I was never a racist kid. Joining the Marine Corps helped to expose me to different people and realize real quickly as an adult, because I joined right out of high school, that all the stuff that was being said, I love these guys. These are my brothers,
So then I have a question then. So
Are you poking holes in my story?
Were there any like significant influences that maybe they weren't the best influences, but they weren't enough to get to you to the point where you cared a little more, or you went a little further?
No, I think what happened is because I realized we're all the same, and the foundational understanding and the strident radical view of our Constitution led me to, if there are absolutes, equality is an absolute. There are no absolutes in our Constitution. The Second Amendment, and I'm okay with gun ownership, 100%. It is a constitutional right. You may disagree. I believe it is. But you don't have a right to a weapon of war. An AR-15, mechanically, caliber, muzzle velocity, everything else other than the name, and a 3-round burst is a weapon. It's an M16A2 service weapon. So, and I'm going off the rails here. So because of that, we all have fundamental equality under the Constitution, under the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. So, no, you don't get to treat other people, whether they're gay, whether they're trans, whether they're black, whether they're whatever. No, they are equal. And I came very hard on that.
So the merits of the Constitution.
Yeah, but understanding it in a more appropriate, fulsome way that isn't used as a weapon. I use it as a welcome sign, not as a club. Anybody? Yeah.
Well, you brought up gun control, and I'm a gun violence prevention activist, actually.
Yeah, good.
So thank you. I actually wanted to ask, before you guys converted to where you are now, what was your stance on guns and that kind of issue?
I have never cared about guns. My family also owned a lot of guns, and I always felt very unsafe with the guns being in the house because there was also a lot of violence in the house. So I never cared about guns.
And I believe that if I had an Abrams tank that I wanted to own, it was none of the government's business. I don't believe that now. There are limits. Scalia has written that there are no absolutes. You can limit ownership, and even speech is limited. So that's where I am now. I don't have a gun on me, nor do we own one, so don't come to my house and try to assassinate. But it's not important to our lives, the gun ownership thing. It's just, and I'm absolutely, we do ask the question that Brittany mentioned about what's the most recent thing you changed your mind about. And this is not the most recent thing, but Las Vegas really changed how I think about guns. And watching, and Sandy Hook. I mean, I know Las Vegas came after Sandy Hook, but it was just like a, holy shit, we need to make some changes here. And for sure, the kids in schools, it's all, and we advocate for that. But we can do both. We can allow people to own guns and have the natural right, whatever, to self-defense, and also stop children from being slaughtered in their schools. I mean, I don't know how high pile of dead kids has to be before we wake up and stop it, but we need to stop it.
I saw your hand back there.
Yes?
Hi, DJ, I'm from Venus. So, I'm not sure how to phrase this exactly, but we're talking about the language of Trump and also of the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
The violent lies, etc. I mean, I can go on for a long time in terms of
You and me both.
talking about the way in which they are talking to their constituents and how it affects our country, including January 6th. And I think there is obviously a direct correlation. Given that the fact that this language from oftentimes the Republicans has resulted in some very bad things, such as, and even in, I will say, in legislation for LGBT. Would you, if you had your druthers, would you make any changes to the freedom of speech and where we draw the lines in terms of lying, and in terms of these non-threat threats by the Republican Party? Where do you think we should go with freedom of speech to make this a better world, if at all, change?
Well, first of all, thank you for a very easy question to answer. I very much appreciate it. But look, it is difficult, super difficult. If I had a magic wand, if I was king, yeah, I would put limits. But if you put limits and you're giving government the power to limit speech in good ways, you're also giving that government, when it's not a Biden, as bad or good as he is, you're also giving that same government the power to limit speech in other ways. So unfortunately, because we are humans and we are fallible and we are shitty in many, many, many ways, innumerable ways, I think short of leaning more heavily on libel and slander and defamation laws, you kind of have to, unless someone's doing the screaming fire in a crowded theater or literally inciting someone else to violence, I think it's very hard. And I'm not smart enough to give you a...
What would you do about outright lies? I mean, how many lies did Trump put forth in his...
Over 30,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
In 4 years, folks.
Yeah. What would you say in terms of dealing with somebody who is a pathological liar, and especially if they're in politics and they're trying to push forward legislation based on those?
Unfortunately, lying, and I'm not a lawyer, nor do I want to be one, but the way I understand it is, lying is fraud, but unless there's a victim of the fraud, there were some legal arguments that I'm really going to be far afield here. And again, not smart enough to really give you a good answer. But there was an attempt to defraud the American people and their disenfranchise them. That would have been fraud. And those legal arguments fell apart pretty quickly as far as in the courtroom. So again, it's a very important question. And unfortunately, this organization invited a dumb shit to talk to you, so I don't know.
One thing that I thought of briefly, again, I'm not going to be able to give a great answer, but we consume a lot of media because of what we do. We play a lot of news clips on the show, and we're always listening to a variety of different news sources, and even sometimes the same story covered by different news organizations, just to kind of get a flavor for which one we prefer to have on the show. And so that gives us the opportunity to see how differently a lot of the mainstream media sources are handling Donald Trump during this election season. When he was running against Hillary Clinton, they would carry his entire rally and allow him to say whatever he wanted. Now when he comes out of the courtroom in New York, they show a clip of maybe 10 seconds, and then as soon as he starts saying something that's false, they cut away. And when I'm saying they, I'm talking about CNN. I'm talking about mainstream media sources. So it took them a long time to learn the lesson that they should have learned much more quickly than they did. But I think they have started to learn that lesson, that the American people are generally upset when you carry lies on your network and that they don't want to see it. And so at least that's one positive, I think, is that the media is starting to do at least some semblance of a correction due to pressure from the American public.
Cameron.
You both kind of addressed it with your parents, but I'm wondering, when you came out of your different, upbringing, did you notice siblings or cousins or maybe neighbors that were in that same style of upbringing coming out afterward? Did you feel like you were the lifeline for anybody at that point? Or?
I certainly wish.
Yeah, there's been some people. I don't know that they. I think I've maybe, and this is such a microcosm of the little community. I graduated with 72 other children in high school. I graduated with a class of 73 kids, so it's not like, thousands of us followed. They all followed my lead. But there have been some people who are connected in our Facebook groups and who went to high school with me. We have patrons on Patreon who are high school friends. So. There has been some influence on that. Yeah, I think so. Giving people permission again, like the Trump thing, except maybe in a good way, or at least from my point of view. But it's just because this is the culture you're surrounded in, there is another way to think, and it's okay. You're not gonna, be too much of a pariah. Yes.
So a common thing that's been going around for a while now, unfortunately, has been the fear-mongering around gender and sexuality, particularly with trans people, but really LGBTQ community at large.
And a resurgence of the latter, for sure.
And for whether worth my time or not, I've had several conversations with folks that don't agree with us on those issues lately, and sometimes I've reached some common ground. But more often than not, based on the way they talk about it, it feels to me that the bigotry or the disgust for these people is the root. And the arguments, whether they're religious or political or philosophical, they feel very post hoc to me.
Sure.
That they're there after the fact to justify something they already feel. Since, given that y'all have talked with so many different people and have thought a lot about changing minds, when there is less room for good faith and you're dealing with more of an emotional kind of bigotry, how do you change those minds?
So this is a question we get a lot, we go in, it's spits and starts and spurts, or whatever the phrasing is, that we'll go through periods where people will ask about changing people's minds, specifically on racism. I have in my head, and I don't have the ability. My skill set is not breaking bread with racists and trying to change their minds. I'm more pugilistic. So I don't have an answer. I don't know, because that's not my skill set. If that is it sounds like that might be your skill set, to talk with people who are diametrically opposed and fundamentally share different values than you. Lean into that and do that. I'm not good at it. I'm more. There's a reason I joined the United States Marine Corps. Not much of a peacenik. I wish I was. Not wired that way. So Brittany is more. Have that ability more than me.
So psychologist Paul Bloom wrote a book called Against Empathy. I know it sounds bad, but his whole argument is that empathy can be weaponized to bring people to the side that you wouldn't want them to be. So for example, all these stories that Trump uses about an immigrant crossing the border and committing a murder, right? Even though, have you guys seen Billy on the Street, Immigrant or Real American?
Oh, it's a great
You guys
bit.
need to look that up on YouTube. Immigrant or Real American, you need to watch that, because he just goes through and is having this guy guess who's an immigrant or Real American, but all the real Americans are mass murderers. And then all the immigrants are people who are amazing actors that everyone loves. It's a great bit.
And as a jumping off point, there were 30,000 murders in the United States last year, just shy under 30,000, and there were 24 murders committed by illegal aliens or whatever. So it's political. It's for sure political. Anyway,
So get back to psychologist Paul Bloom's book Against Empathy. He argues that you know, anecdotes and narrative can be a popular way to convince people in an emotionally charged fashion. And so, you know, maybe those can be used in that way for good, in your case. But yeah, we have really struggled with it, and I think it's probably the most common type of listener communication that we get is I have a family member who I'm trying to maintain a relationship with, but I'm really struggling because they say hateful things at the Thanksgiving dinner table. What should I do? And we always invite listeners to give feedback for that too, and it really varies, but I think, you know, touching on those anecdotes and narratives that try to make it as personal as possible seems to generally be the best and most effective way. I don't know what to do.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. It's a little bit off subject, but the Canadian couple who left.
Pizza. Love pizza.
the Canadian couple who left Canada and went to that Russian
Yeah,
colony.
yeah.
Does anybody know what happened? The last time I saw on YouTube, the guy was walking up the street saying they had to leave. Anyone know?
I don't know why that brings me so much joy. I mean, it's a bummer because it's human suffering and it flies in the face of what I've been talking about. But it is a bummer that they left because I think gays were getting too well treated in Canada or something, so we're out of here. Because Russia, you know, there are no civil rights. And then they get there and their bank accounts were frozen and everything else. Yeah. They are unhappy and they maybe ruin their kids' life. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I thought maybe y'all might know something because Midas Touch covered a little bit on it the other day.
Oh.
But I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I don't know. When you make a bed, sometimes you gotta lie in it.
Yeah.
So I would dovetail on the question over here, which everybody has ropes in the room. I've been in the media for 44 years. I have brothers who spent most of their careers or all of their careers in the media.
In the media?
In the
Sorry,
media.
Marine Corps ruined my hearing, so.
Media. And 3 of my brothers are they're Trump, you know, but we're very close. And I think the key is somehow as a country we keep pushing out to the extreme. We've got to find common ground before we can ever resolve any of these issues, I would think. But the other side of it is, do you think the Democratic Party, it spends so much energy on so many different topics, whereas the Republican Party is focusing on whatever people fear the most. Immigrants,
Sure.
okay, let's push that.
Yeah.
Inflation, let's push that. But there's so many other problems that the Democrats seem to lose focus on. I think that maybe part of the problem why some of these people that maybe are in the middle find themselves leaning towards the fear anger.
Well, I mean, it is what animates us, just at our basest evolutionary juncture of who we are. But I guess I would answer your question with a question like true media people do. What other way is there? I mean, if you have over here policy that's going to be about trade and everything else, and over here you have human rights, civil rights, both things need to be addressed. You can't ignore the human rights element to deal with trade, and you can't ignore trade to deal with just the human. So any leadership in a political manner is going to be trying to address a panoply of issues because we have the width and breadth of the American electorate is a set of interests that is without measure. So you have to, be leaders and do leadership, and it's hard.
I would also say the Public Religion Research Institute finds that 2/3 of Republicans believe that the 2020 election was stolen. And so we're kind of working with this Republican Party that is almost exclusively animated by love of Donald Trump. And then when you talk about the 3 issues that they focus on, like immigration, the economy, they all tend to come back to this crime. They all come back to this root cause of fear of the country not being as white or them losing their power. And so it's tough to work with that when you're working with, love and cult following of Donald Trump, and then also I'm afraid of the country not being white. How do you work with those issues? I think I'm not sure it's the number of issues that the Democratic Party focuses on versus what those issues specifically are that you're working with from the Republican Party. That would be my take.
Good question.
Yeah.
Email me when you find out what the answer is, 'cause I want to know.
I'd like to go back to what you were saying about the news media sort of editing what Trump says. And I read something that struck with me that they're editing, but they're not allowing people to see the rambling and how delusional he is. And so do you think that's affecting how people are seeing him? I think they should let him ramble so people actually see how crazy he is.
Yeah, I'm torn on it because I feel like we had the opportunity to see him ramble, and then he won.
He
And
was given
so,
nearly $2 billion worth of free media exposure in 2016. So,
and I think there's just part of us that, you know, like love the drama or love someone who's like funny. And Donald Trump, unfortunately, can be kind of funny. I don't want to say that, but like just because of the dumbness, I think. But, you know, so I think it's like he appeals to these negative qualities that are within us, that people, you know, they don't say, I want to support him for this. They're just like, I kind of like his vibe. I like that he's like hateful. I like that he, you know, insults Joe Biden. He like says people have ugly wives. Like, that's so funny. That's how I talk in the break room, you know. And so that element I think is concerning. And I just don't like giving him free press or any additional opportunity. For people to see themselves in him in that way, I guess. And I don't know how realistic that is.
so Buzzkill Marcus over here, it looks like, two more? Can we do two more?
I think I've cut off here, actually, we're at 4:30.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, but we are going to Tap Station after this, about 5-ish. I'll do it's a couple miles away, lots of beer, lots of different food. So feel free to join us and we can keep asking.
And by we, he means
questions.
like, we'll,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm open to answering questions or talking or, you know.
We love questions.
Yes. So why don't we give them another thank you.
Thank you guys for having us and taking time out of your busy weekends or lazy, whatever. It's amazing. We're flattered, we're appreciative. We love and appreciate you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.